I give away free Steam games with every major video I do, and here's who won this week. The games available to receive are listed below. To enter, just leave a comment and have contact information on your profile. And now, on with the video. I'm playing something almost every week, and sometimes I want to talk about it and give you a vertical slice. So stick with me for some lightning reviews. This week, on the chopping block. This week I've been playing 35mm, that's 1.38 inches in American. Anywho, this one initially caught my interest after physical copies came up for order on limited run games, so I snagged one for PS4 after looking at the Steam page. The things that initially got me interested were the fact that the developer was out of Russia or the Eastern European area, and that it was advertised as a survival horror first-person shooter, according to Steam tags anyways. Anyone who's watched my videos on Metro 2033 knows that I have a strong thing for first-person shooters out of Russia or Eastern Europe, and the fact that the Steam tags also included Walking Simulator led me to a possible jump into logic that it was going to have an emphasis on atmosphere. Starting up the game, that certainly seems to be the case. The visuals are a bit dated, but enough craftsmanship has gone into the overall environment to at least give strength to the setting. Unfortunately, the game's execution faults show up early and often. One of the biggest ones is that it seems to be suffering a bit of an identity crisis in that it can't decide whether or not it wants to be the aforementioned genres of walking simulator, survival horror, or first-person shooter. The first portion of the game set it up as a walking sim, with the first 20 to 30 minutes barely giving any context. If I hadn't done any research or read any of the initial marketing, I could have just confused it for a game about a really depressing nature walk. Things then jazz up after a while after a bear attack occurs, and I had a brief moment of panic because the controls had been really poorly explained, and I thought I was going to be doing a calm, confident walk away from the bear while it was actively sinking its claws into my backside. After stumbling across the sprint button, making it to safety, and settling in for the first night, your comrade starts to give you some context for the situation you find yourself in. A globe-scarring disease wiped out a major portion of the Earth's population. Cities quickly degraded into anarchy and might makes right, and now humanity is just barely scraping by, with you two on a destination to who knows where. Shortly after, I started to encounter the game's next chief problem, in that it's really bad at communicating where it wants you to go in order to do what it's asking you to do. In this case, all I needed to do was take a bucket I'd found and fill up at a nearby well. Too bad I then had to spend the next 30 minutes wandering around a desolate, empty town looking for a well that ended up being covered in a wooden structure that I walked past about 4 times, not realizing it was the stupid thing I was looking for. I'll openly admit that I'm not fond of games that don't give you any clues on how to proceed, and I'm usually pretty observant, but the game could have been a bit more clever in its use of environment to tell you where to go. Anyway, after getting fed up and finding a guide, of which I ended up keeping in an open window most of the remainder of the playthrough, I kept the story moving along as best I could. There were moments of environmental storytelling and a building of atmosphere that I genuinely was digging, and when I got to the point where I was able to ride a car on some railroad tracks, I was ready to make this my game of the year. After all, I like trains. Unfortunately, the conclusion of that segment is where things went completely off the rails, which was appropriate in hindsight. Immediately following, this is where I reestablished that I was basically stuck in a long and painful escort quest while I had my NPC comrade with me. Subsequently, I came across an old man and his grandson who I endeavored to help with the use of QuickTime events, and the animation was utterly hilarious. Then, following a few drawn-out and protracted scripted events of limited interaction, I received a gun and was gifted with some of the slowest and stiffest shooting mechanics that I encountered, which fortunately were entirely optional, and I was able to just run away from the scene, although it turns out I ran too fast and my NPC didn't know where to go until I entered the battlefield again. From this point out, though, the game was a spiraling nosedive of annoyance and tedium. I continued to come across environments that were bad at telling me where I needed to go in order to complete an objective, but added the absurdity of a backdrop where urgency was stressed due to the presence of enemies trying to gain access to you while seemingly giving you all the time in the world, or unknown monstrosities presented as chasing you, but never posing a direct physical threat beyond menacing noises that seem to occur at random in darkened corridors. Now, bear in mind, I'd already been debating turning off the game and resigning the ending to the classification of "will never see unless I look it up on YouTube," but I was sticking through it, with the easily missable environmental details necessary to ensure progress, to immersion-breaking lapses in animation, to a weirdly intensive lathe simulator minigame. Then the game decided to gift me with a Kalashnikov, immediately followed by a mule kick to the temple. You see, the game requires you to jump down into a boxed arena and gifts you the AK before unleashing a pack of wild dogs on you. I then proceeded to die faster and more repeatedly than a chicken with a healing factor inside of a KFC. The shooting controls were so stiff, in addition to your deliberate and languid movement speed, that the game basically gave me a jump in difficulty that turned into the equivalent of running headlong into a steel-reinforced concrete wall. I wanted to like this game. I was excited for another chance to experience the perspective that I've been researching regarding Eastern European storytelling, but 35mm, while laudable in the things it was attempting, fails at almost every turn. Maybe something was lost from the transition from PC to console, but I found the experience immensely disappointing. It's like excitedly preparing for a hookup with someone who's boasting a full foot long, only to show up with 1.38 inches. Maybe this will become one of those obscure limited print games that'll increase in value and give it some semblance of worth, but otherwise I have no interest to return return to it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go back to grinding Final Fantasy X to relax. Hey, look at that, it's the end of the video. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember that commenting can actually win you a free prize. So until next time, this is a Guillotine saying thanks for watching and keep your head on your shoulders.